Good morning, everyone. It is 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Happy Tuesday. Normally we don't meet on Tuesdays, so this is kind of outside of our norm. I had to remind myself that it was Tuesday and not Wednesday this morning. But thank you for joining us this morning. We're super excited to have Laura from Clearbrook with us. We're super excited that she's agreed to collaborate with us and bring us the forgotten factor sensory processing. Everyone is muted. Your cameras are disabled. Please use that chat box throughout to interact. I know Laura will be asking you to interact throughout. Make sure that your settings are set to everyone. I think it defaults to host and panelists, so make sure that's set to everyone so that everyone can see your responses. You can also use that Q&A for questions also. Visit our website, icpn.org. You can view all of our upcoming webinars in addition to viewing some of our past webinars. After this webinar is done today, it will be posted to our YouTube's website or our YouTube channel, which is accessible through our website within a couple weeks. We have a couple upcoming webinars that are there's only one that's on the actual website, but that's the one on August 28th, and that is responding to behavioral signs of trauma. We will also add a second session of that in September, and then we have compassion, fatigue, and burnout will occur in September. Also, those will be added to our website here within the next couple of weeks. The only other thing that that I have to say is certificates. So continuing education certificates, they will be sent to the email address that you registered with. So by clicking on the link that you received from Zoom, you are accounted for today. Zoom tracks your attendance. So your certificate will come to that email address that you registered with. If we have anyone that is on the phone that called into the webinar, you will need to send me an email. I will put my email into the chat box, but it is the first initial of my first name, D, and then it is my last name, Dailey, DAILEY, at hope.us. I want to make sure that if you are on the phone, you are accounted for in attendance. So I will need you to send me an email to let me know what number you are calling from. But certificates will be sent out by the end of the week. Granted, there are no issues with technology. Fingers crossed. The last couple ones, we've had a couple issues and it's been a little bit delayed. But hopefully by the end of the week, everyone will have their certificate. If for some reason you do not receive yours, then feel free to reach out to me. Again, I will put my email address into the chat box so that you have that and can reach out to me if needed. I think that is all I have. Laura, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Wonderful. Thanks, Danielle. Before you go off, Danielle, can we just make sure everybody sees the slides? We're good to go.
Yep.
Let's see. Everybody can see the agenda now?
Yep.
Beautiful. Thank you for the thumbs up, you guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Danielle. When I met with Danielle before this, we went through all of the technology things. Oh, I appreciate you guys so much participating. Thank you for letting me know that we're good to go. I was telling Danielle that I thought this training was going to be 20 to 30 people. And when we were communicating and she said over 1,100 people were registered, I went, oh, okay, this is going to be real interesting. So we've pivoted, made some technology changes. If anything happens, please throw something in the chat. Danielle will be monitoring that and will adjust as needed. So again, thank you all for joining. I'm very excited to be here this morning, and thank you to the Illinois Crisis Prevention Network for having me. Here's what we're going to be going through today. So we are going to start with introductions, and then I'd love to hear everybody's first thoughts about sensory processing. What are we all bringing to the table today? After that, we'll discuss the forgotten factor. We'll go through sensory processing 101 and its impact. We're also going to discuss signs of difficulty and then how to address those difficulties. Finally, we'll discuss our next thoughts. So to start, again, my name is Laura Rampy. I have worked in the field of developmental disabilities for 16 years. I have spent 14 years working in early intervention. For those who are not familiar, that's birth to 3 services for kiddos with disabilities and delays. I have worked for 10 years as an occupational therapist. I've worked in EI. I have also worked in outpatient hospital clinics, in the schools, and currently in adult services. I have worked with Clearbrook for 10 years, primarily with child therapy. Child therapy is Clearbrook's wonderful therapy program for infants, toddlers, and young kiddos to support their therapy needs. Currently, I serve as Director of Therapy Services for Adult Services and as occupational therapist for all of our adults here at Clearbrook. If you are not familiar with Clearbrook, Clearbrook is a wonderful nonprofit organization that serves over 8,000 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities every year. We provide programming and services, including residential placements, day programming sites, clinical services, employment services, and more. We are the largest provider of home-based programs and services in the state of Illinois. We have almost 60 SILAs, and we have 4 ICFs, 3 16 beds, and 1 85 bed. Additionally, our clinical services is made up of my therapy team, our behavioral support team, and our behavioral health team, which is essentially counseling. So Clearbrook is very committed to ensuring that our individuals' needs are met. So check us out if you're not familiar. Now, we're going to attempt to do a poll everywhere. If you are not familiar, poll everywhere is a way in which you are able to participate through your phone or through your computer if you're on a computer. What I would really like is just to know who's here. Are you a family member of an individual? Are you a social worker? Do we have any other OTs out there? So what I am going to do is share. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and pull up the poll everywhere instructions for you. Okay. I'm gonna cross our fingers that this works. Okay. Could I get some of those wonderful thumbs up if you guys can see that? Awesome, you're amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So please feel free to scan the QR code. Oh, you guys are awesome. Thank you for participating like this. Scan the QR code. You can send a text. You can join online. And it says, I am ... So again, please just let me know what's your role. If poll everywhere does not work for you, please put your answer in the chat. Again, Danielle is checking that and will be sharing information and questions. So I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to get logged into this. Once you are logged in, it should only be once, so we'll have a few more of these and it should be a little bit easier. Okay, let's click over to our responses. The instructions will still be on the screen. Ow. Oh, we have a lot of cues here. That's awesome. I see friend, SDA, CODA, vocational, admin, children's rehab, SILA. I think I saw Park District up there. This is really fun to watch, you guys. I see VP, I see Academy, I see Clearbrook, Clinical. Oh my. I'm gonna give it a couple more minutes here just to kind of calm down and see where we land. Oh, technology is crazy. Okay, it seems like we're slowing down just a little bit. So the big ones I'm seeing, the biggest by far is QIDP. I also see ISC. I see some coordinators on. Wow. We have everybody. Oh, I see Texas in there. My goodness. Okay. We have a whole bunch of people here. I am thrilled that you are all here. Thank you for sharing that. I will do my best to tailor this presentation to everybody's needs. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment here now. Again, thank you for participating in that. I'm going to close out a poll everywhere, and we will get back to our presentation. All right, can I get another one of those thumbs up if you can now see the welcome slides? Cool. All right, Now we're jumping right back to pull everywhere. Thank you guys, you're amazing. First thoughts, what I would like to know now, and again, I'm gonna stop screen sharing. I apologize if this is discombobulating for anybody. Whenever we talk about sensory, I have found that people bring different things to the table. They have different experiences, different levels of understanding. And so I'd really love to know, what is everybody thinking right now when I say sensory processing? So here is our next pull everywhere, and it should be the same process as before. So there's that QR code. You can text in, join by the web. I'll leave those instructions up for a moment. And really take your time, pause and reflect. What does sensory processing mean to you? I see people responding. So I'm assuming that means this is working, which is wonderful. All right, I'm going to click over to the responses as they're coming in. Holy cow. Wow. Yes, overstimulation, information. I saw Alzheimer's in there, absolutely. Environment. Ooh, I love that I saw regulation. That's one of my favorite words. Difficulty is a big one. Process, people, world, environment, senses. I like perception, clothing, aversion, data. Yes, I love data. I must have some behaviorists on here in BCBAs. Co-regulation, that is a great one, especially when we're talking about our littles. Ooh, vestibular. Ah, you guys are amazing. I love all of that. Yes. What we are going to focus on today is all of that in a sense. We are definitely going to talk about what our senses are, how we process that information in the world, and what happens when I see the word overstimulated. I would call that dysregulated. Thank you again. We will jump right in now. So I will stop sharing my screen, go back to our slides here. Thank you for your patience as I juggle around with all of this. Let's see. Well, that didn't work. Let's try this. Can everybody see first thoughts now from that poll everywhere we just did? Awesome, thank you. So we are going to discuss the forgotten factor. What I want to point out, thank you guys for all of those thumbs up and applauses. At the end of each section moving forward, we will pause for any questions that are in the chat. Again, Danielle is monitoring those, so feel free to throw questions in. It's really important that as we go, everybody has an understanding before we move on to the next section, because we're going to go through and really set the foundation and then talk about the application and what we can do with that. So the forgotten habit factor. What happens to sensory needs as kiddos grow up? Do the needs go away? Well, maybe, but more likely they're being met or those sensory needs have changed. Does sensory stop happening? No, absolutely not. Spoiler alert, we all do sensory all the time. It does not stop happening. So what happens? Why when we think about sensory processing in adults, well, why isn't that a thought, right? We're going to look at that from 3 different perspectives. We're going to talk about the systems that are in place to support our adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Then we are going to talk about occupational therapy practitioners. We're also going to touch on the literature that supports sensory processing. So when we talk about systems, we're going to take a lifespan approach. When kiddos are born, if they have a disability, if they are medically complex, if there's a delay that's found that before the age of 3, what is well established is a system of early intervention. For those that are not familiar, early intervention is a program. It's Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and its purpose is to provide therapy services to kiddos birth to age 3 in their natural environments, whether that's with their families, whether that's at daycare. I've had sessions in the library. How it came about is that when the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act came out and said, hey, our loved ones who have disabilities should have equal access to education. A few years later in the 80s, research came out saying that birth to 3 brain development is huge. We know that now, that's well established, right? Your brain is like wet cement from birth to age 3. We can get in there, we can do a lot to support you. Because of that, Part C was added onto IDEA. That's why when kiddos turn 3, they transition into the school district and they receive their services there. So again, when we start with birth to 3, you have the early intervention system. You also have outpatient therapy services. So there's outpatient clinics that can be found all around to support needs. What's the difference, right? Well, EI is really focused on the family and how that family functions as a unit. If to say you had an individual who had cerebral palsy who needed constraint-induced movement therapy. CIMT is if you are somebody who has contractures in your upper extremity. So if your arm is maybe like this, constraint-induced movement therapy paired with casting can support the use of that arm by first casting that arm into a position and then doing intensive therapy to support. Casting the other arm and then using that arm to support. And so that's something that we're not going to do in early intervention. That's more medical, okay? And so those services are going to be provided in outpatient. When a kiddo turns 33, again, they go into the schools. They receive their services there. Those outpatient services are still available, right? Those clinics that are in the area, maybe by you, they continue to serve the pediatric population. When, I'm not going to say kiddos anymore, when our young adults turn 22 and when they graduate that following year, there's no more school system to transition to. There are limited HCBS waiver services, but I have a really great quote in a moment that will discuss that a little bit more. And there are not outpatient clinics meant for adults with IBD. Okay, so maybe you have outpatient for rehab, like I have a number of adults who had a hip replacement or they fell and broke their wrist, and they're going to go to any local establishment like an ATI, like an Athletico, and get their rehab there if they're able to be successful in that setting. But those standalone clinics that we see in peds do not exist with our adults, okay? I'm sure most of you know we call this the surface cliff. You graduate, there's not too much available, okay? Why is that? This is an excerpt from Toni Elizabeth Sadler, and I will not read the entire thing, but my favorite parts are that she describes that there's that young adults experience a sudden drop in comprehensive day services. Additionally, access to those programs that are available can be complicated, including barriers such as wait lists, administrative red tape, and a lack of centralized dissemination of information regarding available disability services. I'm sure all of you know this. If we break it down real quick, what does that mean? Well, working backwards, we have a lack of centralized dissemination of information regarding available disability services. So not only are those services limited, it's hard to be able to find out how to access them. Maybe you're hooked up with a provider like Clearbrook and you have an STA or you have a Q who can support you through that and navigate that, but you need to be able to find that initially, especially if your school district hasn't helped you. From there, even if you're able to find what's available, we have all of that wonderful administrative red tape, right? All of those hoops we have to jump through. Then, if you can figure out what you need to do, if you can jump through the hoops to get there, there's wait lists left and right. So we're really, from a systems perspective, not in a great place to continue to serve our adults in the way that they have been served from birth to age 22. Okay, now let's talk about occupational therapy practitioners. So when you work with kiddos who are birth to 3 as an occupational therapist, we're heavy, right? We're part of the team and everybody is well aware. We have OT, we have physical therapy, we have developmental therapy, we have our speech language pathologists. It's a given. That's the same in the schools until about middle school. Middle school, we start to teeter a little bit, and There is a new push, which I very much appreciate, for OT supporting voc with our adults going into transition programs. But when you, again, hit that 22, it's very hard to find occupational therapy practitioners specifically to support that population. Why is that? Again, we don't have systems in place where I, as an OT, can insert myself and say, oh, I'd like to work here. When we learn about it in grad school, I learned how to work in EI. I learned how to work in the schools, in the hospitals, in the nursing homes, and outpatient clinics. When we talk about this setting, the information that we're given is, and this is across therapies, this is not just OT, right? There are so many opportunities and you need to create your own path. And that's challenging, right? As a new grad, maybe that's not something you're interested in, or you don't know where to look, just in the same way some of our families don't know where to look, where to help. So I hope these percentages are too small, are not too small, I apologize. This is the AOTA 2023 Workforce and Compensation Survey Report. AOTA is the American Occupational Therapy Association. And so all this is showing is that very first bar, schools, early intervention, and community education settings, a quarter of OTs in the country work in that field. As we go through this, there is not a line that our population fits in. We might get into home and community settings, but that's a little bit more home health. Maybe we're in other innovative or emerging settings. Even if you combine those two, we're at maybe 10%, and we're a small percentage of that. So again, there's not too many OTs working in this field. Now we're going to jump to the literature. Okay, so again, we're painting the picture. Why is this forgotten? We don't have the systems, we don't have the practitioners. Now we talk about the literature. When I was in school, depending who you asked, there were 5 to 8 different theories on how sensory processing even happened. Why is that? That's because sensory processing is a neurological process. It's in the brain. We have learned a lot about the brain, but we have a lot left to learn. Because of that, it's really hard to understand how certain things happen. And one of those things happens to be sensory processing. Because of that, you can imagine, it's then very hard to be able to assess sensory processing. So we have limited assessments. With limited assessments, we have limited randomized controlled studies. What are RCTs? RCTs are kind of the gold standard of research, right? So if you were to, for example, fall and break your wrist and you had a broken bone, you could go get an x-ray done, and then you could go see a certified hand therapist who has lots and lots of literature of exactly how to heal that bone and strengthen the muscles around so you're able to function again. We don't have that with sensory processing for the reasons that I just explained, and because everybody does sensory processing a little bit different, which we'll learn soon. As I was preparing for this training, I was doing a little bit of a literature review, and what I noticed is that there is increasing research, which is really exciting, and there's way more research for adults. Right now, what I'm seeing is that we're just establishing in a qualitative way that sensory processing needs still exist. Okay, so we're not there yet with knowing what to do and how to do it, but we're saying, hey, this is a thing. So steps in the right direction. But again, we're not there. So what happens to sensory needs as kiddos grow up? The systems do not support addressing those sensory needs. There are not occupational therapy practitioners to address the needs in the setting. And there is limited research. Our sensory processing needs are forgotten. Okay, so that's what happens. Before we jump into sensory processing 101, Danielle, did we have any questions? I saw some hand raises.
There were no questions. There was just a comment that I wanted to bring to your attention. Jessica said that if a person experiences a gap and they're coming to the attention of the system at a later age, then there's also difficulty proving that a diagnosis happened prior to 21, and then being found eligible for services is difficult.
Yes. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely.
But other than that, there is no questions thus far.
Cool. We'll keep on keeping them then. Thank you, Danielle. All right. So moving on to sensory processing. We're going to take a big step back, talk about what is sensory processing. Sensory processing 101. Again, it's a neurological process. There's 5 to 8 different theories on how it happens, depending who you ask. Grossly, it is a 3-step process. It is the body's ability to first take in sensory information, process it in the brain, and then finally respond to it. So we're going to do a quick poll everywhere. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I would love to know, thank you for your patience. How many senses do we have? 5, 6, 7, or 8? Oh, hold on, it's saying the activity is locked. I apologize. Let's try that again. There we go. It's still saying it's locked. I'm guessing you guys aren't able to get in right now. How about this? Can we throw it in the chat? How many senses do you think we have? 5, 6, 7, or 8? And I apologize. I'm not sure why that's not working all of a sudden. I'm seeing 5. I'm seeing everything. Oh, more. Oh, I saw 5 basic. Okay. 5, 8. So we're a little all over the place here. So let's narrow this down a bit. We have 8 senses. Okay, 8 main senses. For those of you who said we have more, there are, I believe, 47 if you get real specific into the nerve endings in your skin. We're not going to discuss those today. Kudos to you for knowing that. We all learn about our 5 senses in school, but yes, we actually have 8 senses. So what are those senses? Your sense of vision is your sense of sight. Auditory is your sense of hearing. Olfactory is a very fancy way to say your sense of smell. Gustatory is your sense of taste. Tactile is very simply your sense of touch. Now here's the next 3. So proprioception is your body's ability to know where it is in space. So if everybody can see me, my body knows that my hand is behind my back right now because my muscles in my joints are working with gravity to tell me that. Okay, I mean, I can see it on the screen, but if I wasn't, my muscles and my joints are working with gravity to tell me that. I want you to remember this sense because this, if we were to have one, would be our magical tool in OT world. This is the most regulating sense. Okay. The vestibular sense is your body's sense of balance that works very closely with your sense of proprioception for motor planning and motor processing. Vestibular sense is made up of your eyes and your ears, and they work together to maintain a sense of equilibrium. Okay. Interoception is our 8th sense. This one's a little bit different. Some people call it interoception. With this, it's how does everything feel inside? Does my throat hurt? Is my stomach gurgling? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Do I feel like I'm going to throw up? All of those internal senses. This can be one of the most dysregulating senses that we have. Which, if you think about it, right, if your head hurts and you're supposed to be in a meeting all day, it's really hard to focus. It's the same thing for our adults. Again, these are the steps to processing sensation. First, you need to be able to take sensory information in, then you process it in your brain, then you respond to that sensory information. Difficulties can arise in any of the 3 steps. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. First one, we're talking about taking in sensory information. If someone, for example, is blind, if they don't have access to that sense, your other senses may heighten. Think about Stevie Wonder for a second. When Stevie Wonder played the piano, what did he do? He moved his head back and forth. Yes, his music is amazing and everybody enjoys rocking out to it. But think about his vestibular sense. Okay, again, your vestibular sense is your eyes and your ears working together for balance. Stevie Wonder had half of that sense missing. So your vestibular sense in your ears have little groups of cells. They're kind of like stones, and they go around and around and around and around and around. That's what maintains your body's sense of equilibrium. So what did Stevie Wonder do? Moved his head back and forth, increased the movement of those balls, so he's making up for that half of the sense that's missing. Okay, so again, that's intaking the information we can have difficulty with. You can also have difficulty taking in sensory information if you have an ear infection. My daughter is 18 months old, and that girl gets ear infections like nobody's business. Okay, the first one, I remember my husband was very concerned because she was a few months old and sitting up and all of a sudden fell over. A few months later, she's all of a sudden walking real wobbly, and he's going, "What's going on?" She, with an ear infection, had fluid in her ears. Okay, what does that fluid do besides be there, become infected, become very painful, impact hearing? Because there's fluid, those little stones aren't able to move as they should. So all of a sudden she's off balance. Okay, again, difficulty with taking that information in. Step 2, processing sensory information. Your ability to process that information can cause difficulties. So again, we don't have a ton of information on sensory processing, but what we do have, especially for our individuals with autism, the last statistic I saw is that 80% of individuals with autism experience what is called sensory defensiveness. Now, that's not a diagnosis. It's a description of their sensory processing abilities. What does sensory defensiveness mean? It means that your body is literally defensive towards incoming sensation, okay? We're going to talk more about that later, but to illustrate that, this is one of my favorite pictures that I really just need to get framed in my office, okay? And I apologize, it's coming out a little blurry on my screen right now. Has anybody seen this picture before? I'd love a thumbs up, maybe if you have. Okay, a few people have, cool. So the picture on the right, or I'm not sure if it's reversed, so the picture that has mostly gray matter with one kind of streak of rainbow colors is an individual for whatever typical means, right? Who is typically developing the way that their brain lights up when they see something. Okay, that's the highways in the brain that when I look at the door, that's how my brain is lighting up. The other image, this beautiful multicolored highway, is Temple Grandin's brain when she sees something, how it lights up. For those who are not familiar with Temple Grandin, she is she's a phenomenal human being. She has really changed the way that we are able to understand how individuals with different sensory needs process the world. And so she explains her sensory processing needs and abilities as thinking in pictures, okay? So when she looks at something, that's how her brain lights up. Now, I did a sensory processing presentation for a group of Boy Scouts, and they had one of my all-time favorite reactions. They said, "Oh my gosh, she's a superhero." And I said, "Yeah, in so many ways she is. She's created cattle herding equipment used across the Americas. She's helped us understand how to support individuals who maybe don't have the same verbal abilities that she does." So cool, right? And I'm seeing the thumbs up. Yes, superhero, love it. At the same time, I think about how after a long day, I get in the car and I want to drive home in silence with very little traffic and just take a breath. How exhausted would my brain be if that's how it lit up every time I looked at something? So yes, we can harness those capabilities and we can use them in amazing ways like Temple Grandin is, and we can help our individuals do that. We also need to recognize that, hey, they might need us to help them learn how to take a break, how to manage that, because that could be really tiring. So again, that's that idea that In step 2, the processing sensation, that we process differently. Another way you might process sensory information differently is if you have a spinal cord injury. Okay, so your spinal cord is essentially your highway for sensory processing. Okay, sensory processing is a neurological process. It involves your central nervous system. And so if you have a spinal cord injury, say you were to have a spinal cord injury in your lower back, for example, okay, many times what happened is at the level of that injury, sensory information can no longer go up that highway. That's why we have impaired motor difficulties, we have impaired sensation. So people with spinal cord injuries often have to be very careful when they're cooking, make sure that they don't touch something hot because their body doesn't register that anymore. Okay, so again, processing sensation, we can have difficulty there. Then we talk about response to sensory information. So that third step. So again, I'm repeating this over and over again. I apologize if you're tired of hearing it. I really just want to help you guys understand. We take the information in, we process it in our brain. Now you might be saying, Laura, what do you mean we have difficulties responding? Okay. Well, here's a good example. Okay, flowers. Most people enjoy flowers. For me, I didn't know until I was in OT school that I actively avoided the flower department at grocery stores. Why is that? When I was young, I essentially grew up going to funerals. We had a lot of people pass away in my family. To me, flowers remind me of being in a funeral home. To the point where when I got married, I made my own bouquets from fake flowers because I didn't want to smell flowers all day. Okay, that's me as somebody who, whatever typical is typically developing and has learned to recognize that and adjust to that. Okay. It might also be something like a fire alarm. So if you are 4 years old and you're in school for the first time and you hear a fire alarm and you bolt under the table, your body has learned very quickly that it does not like that sound. So now when you're 16 and you're in high school and you hear the fire alarm, maybe your body doesn't go, oh, that sound from a sensory perspective, but maybe your body has learned that it doesn't like that sound and it's going to go into that response. Okay. So again, we can have difficulty taking in, processing, and responding. Any questions with that? Okay. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to stop sharing this and we're going to pull up a video. Now we're going to pull this all together. And I'm really going to hope that this decides to work. Okay, I am going to use a whiteboard. Can everybody see the whiteboard? Okay, and I apologize, you might get a real funky view of me and my hand as we're doing this here. Oh, all the thumbs up. You guys are great. Thank you so much. Let me close all of this because this is aggressive. Okay. So thank you for the thumbs up again. I appreciate you guys. We have 8 senses. We have to be able to take all that in, process it, and respond to it. That is something that we do every second of the day. So what does that look like? If we pull it together here, and I'm assuming the thumbs up means everybody can see me drawing. I apologize. I am an occupational therapist who does not have great fine motor skills. So hopefully you can all see this. The point of this is that we have 4 levels of arousal in our body. Okay. So the first level, is anybody here familiar with the zones of regulation? Need to see some thumbs up. A lot of this, okay. Lots of our schools use them. Zones of regulation is a curriculum that combines sensory processing with emotions to help teach kiddos and adults, to be honest, how to recognize their emotions and what they need to do to get into a state so that they can do whatever it is they're trying to do. All the thumbs up. Cool. Great. Okay. Brief overview. The only reason I bring it up is because I'm going to pair that with this explanation. So hopefully it gives a little more context. So This bottom layer here is what I would call our low level of arousal. Okay, this would be the blue zone if you were in zones of regulation. Next up is what I like to call ready to go. Oh my, you guys, I apologize. This is quite the exercise in writing. Okay, that's our green level. Or our green zone rather, apologies. Yellow zone is next. I would call that irritated, maybe agitated. Finally, we have the red zone. The red zone in zones of regulation is meltdown, okay, in this example. So at the bottom here, gosh, I hope you guys can read this, apologies. We are gonna have sensory events, okay? Oh, I love that. Oh, I guess I do know this more than I thought. Love that, love that, love that. So we have sensory events throughout the day, okay? Three, and then here's a real big one. So this first carrot up is going to be, I wake up and my alarm clock is obnoxious. Second is now I'm in the car and my coffee's really hot. Now I'm stuck in traffic and I hear people beeping. Now I hear a crash. Now I hear the police coming to help. Well, now I'm at work and I just spilled my hot coffee all over my lap. Sounds like quite a morning, right? When individuals are able to successfully process sensation, their day starts at that purple X. Okay. Starts lower in the ready to go level of arousal. With that first sensory event, you're going to move up towards irritated, but you can calm yourself back down pretty easily. Okay. The next carrot, okay, I think we said that was hot coffee. Maybe you're getting closer to irritated and you're not going to come back down, but you're still pretty ready to go. Here comes that traffic incident. All right, well, now I'm irritated and this is annoying. Okay, it's a little better, so I'm teetering, but oh my gosh, I just spilled my hot coffee all over my lap. Meltdown, I need a breather. I can calm myself back down. Switching gears, if you are an individual, and I'm trying to pick a color that's, do dark purple here. An individual who has autism, you may remember I said the last statistic I saw is that 80% of our individuals with autism experience something called sensory defensiveness, okay? That means that their body starts out here during the day, okay? What does that feel like? Feels like fight or flight. So let's talk through what their process looks like, and then I'll explain that fight or flight piece a little bit more. So that first arrow up with their alarm clock, well, let's say they can stay in ready to go, okay? The difference is they're not able to recover like someone who can typically process sensation. Okay, they're not recovering as quickly. They're staying elevated. They're staying escalated. So when that hot coffee comes, man, they're already irritated. Maybe they can pull it back together, but again, they're not going to recover as well as we can, or if you are typically developing or not, however you process sensation, right? So when those next three come, maybe we're even going to head towards meltdown and we pull it back together. We take a deep breath, but we're still living up here. So now when that hot coffee spills, man, I'm done and I'm done for a while. Okay. That's also why when we look at individuals and we talk about sensory processing and we talk about behaviors, sidebar, the question, is it sensory or is it behavior? In my experience, 9 times out of 80% of people with autism experience what's called sensory defensiveness, and we will talk about that in just a moment. It's not a diagnosis, it's just a way to describe their sensory processing needs. So when we talk about, again, the sidebar, quick sidebar, we talk about, is it sensory or is it behavior? Most of the time it's both, okay? We have those learned behaviors, we have sensory components that are constantly impacting us, but when we're looking for specific triggers, right? If we were to have a Monday like this, right? I'm going to come into work and I'm going to be pretty elevated. I'm going to have to take some deep breaths. But let's say, for example, I erased those first ones. Okay. Whether I am this light purple or this dark purple, right? I am going to be hanging out here. And then that one's going to come and I'm going to go up. Okay. That's why it does not always look consistent, right? We don't always have consistent triggers because people come in with different things, right? And that's everybody, whether that's sensory, whether that's something else. And I'm seeing these comments pop up and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I'm going to try to get through what I'm saying and then we'll talk more about this. I love all the interaction. So thank you guys for that. When we talk about, I'm going to do my best and see if I can erase this last one. Oh, I can just push undo. There we go. So what do we do about that? Ooh, one more thing I want to point out. I don't want to just talk about individuals with autism because there are all sorts of needs. You may also have an individual here. Let's do, here, we'll do like an orangey color, okay? There's plenty of individuals who start out in low arousal, okay? What does that mean? When I worked in the hospital with individuals, we had to put a wet washcloth on their chest to wake them up. Are individuals who have low tone. So for example, are individuals who have Down syndrome. Low tone does not mean how big are your biceps, how strong are you? It's how much power, how much twitch does your brain need to send to your muscle to get your muscle to activate? It's kind of confusing. The point is individuals with low arousal, low muscle tone need more to wake their bodies up, okay? So these same sensory events in here, throw those back in here. So we had one there, our traffic series of 3, okay? Those same individuals now, those events are just gonna help wake them up. So maybe it's gonna take even more for them to get to this meltdown level. The other piece of this is that everybody responds differently and everybody's level of arousal is different. So I have worked with individuals who it seems like, oh, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. It's pretty typical, right? I've had some individuals where the majority of their sensory profile is meltdown and low arousal. So that ready to go area is very, 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 very small and very, very hard to maintain, okay? We might get irritated for a moment and then, oh, we're done though. Okay, everybody does this. Everybody does this differently. I'm seeing a lot of things come through. If it's okay, I'm just going to get through the next 2 slides and I'll keep this screen up for right now just to support that. And then we'll switch gears and I'll answer some questions before we move on. So I think I saw a lot of questions come up about what do we do about this, right? How do we support? There's 2 ways we can support. We can support proactively. We can support reactively, okay? So proactively, if you remember, in OT world, I mentioned that if we were to have a magical tool, it would be proprioception. Why do I say that? Yes, proprioception tells us where our body is in space. It's also our body's natural calming mechanism. So if you think about some adults, when they get stressed, what do? Some people, like I used to enjoy working out. I used to go sprinting when I was stressed out. Well, what did that do for my body? Okay. Your receptors for proprioception, can everybody still see me right now? I hope so. Okay, cool. I'm gonna pause for coffee, apologies. Okay, your receptors for proprioception are deep in your muscle, almost at your bone. So when you go exercise, when you go sprinting, what is that doing? You are actively activating those receptors. What does that do? That tells your body, it's time to calm down. Okay, what's the other way that people activate that sense? Passively. So what do some adults like to do when they're stressed? They go get a massage. It's the same concept, right? You're activating that sense of proprioception, but you're doing it passively, meaning somebody's doing it for you. But it has that similar effect, right? Of telling your body, it's time to calm down. Okay, the little research that we do have says, and this is where I'm going to go back to drawing on the screen, this messy screen. Thank you guys for bearing with me here. We need another color. A little research we do have says that if you can provide good proprioceptive input every 60 to 90 minutes, you can help the body regulate. Okay, well, why is that? We're going to say that, yes, Janet, that's correct. We'll get to that more later. Yes, Melissa, that's correct, but a little bit more, and there's limited research on that. Yes, you guys are great. We are getting to all of this. You are spot on. So if I were to, sorry, I'm trying to close out of this chat box. You guys are asking such great questions, and I so appreciate it. We're going to pretend that these big blue X's, all of a sudden your morning's extended, and those X's indicate that we've done some good proprioceptive work every 90 minutes. Okay, what is that going to do for, if I'm an individual, I'm going to go to the light purple line here, right? I escalated, I calmed down. Okay, I'm going up again. That's going to pull me back down. So I'm no longer going to be up here, right? My trajectory is now here. Even if I get here, here comes that 90 minutes, it's pulling me back down. Okay, so that's the idea, is that we might go up, but we're going to be proactive and implement. That's what a sensory diet is. Okay, a sensory diet is not something you eat. A sensory diet is something that you are doing to meet your body's regulation needs in a specific way, in a prescribed way, so that you are able to maintain a level of arousal that supports what your body needs to be doing. Okay, so again, we're pulling down there. Now, a reactive strategy would be, I'm already, oh, you guys, this is a mess. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's switch to a highlighter. I am already up here in meltdown land. Okay, I have not been able to pull my body down. I have not been able to use any strategies. Nobody's been able to get to me to help me. I'm living up here. Okay, this is, I need to take a walk away from a meeting that's really frustrating. This is our kiddos who are crying in the corner. This is that fight or flight response, which we'll talk about again in a moment. What do we do then? Well, then we switch to, how do we help your body calm down? You are already in this escalated state. Now we need to implement strategies to help your body regulate, to slow down, to get back to that ready to go, or maybe even to that low state so that your body can catch up. Okay. I'm going to jump back real quick, different highlighter. I'm seeing comments about day programming, and yes, 110%, could not agree more. Personally, I wish we no longer made fluorescent lights for anybody, but that's just me. Ooh, light covers. I love that, Jill. So when we are talking about this light purple X here versus this dark purple X, okay? What does that dark purple X feel like? What does that feel like for individuals who are experiencing sensory defensiveness? That feels like you are in a dark parking garage in a bad part of town in the middle of the night. You can't find your car, and you just bought hundreds of dollars worth of groceries. And all of a sudden you hear a noise. What does your body do? Your body goes into fight or flight. Why am I talking about that? Because fight or flight is a nervous system response. And what does sensory processing run on? Our nervous system. So your body goes, okay, so what do we see our adults do? We see fight or flight. Fight, you have self-injurious behaviors. You have throwing furniture. You have, I'm just going to hit my peer because they're too close to me. You have flight. We have elopement. We have decreased attention span, refusal to participate. Okay, it's really important to understand when we're looking at those behaviors where a person's sensory regulation, where their body needs are. What's the goal of a sensory diet, right, for those individuals? The goal is this light purple X, what that feels like. What that feels like is you just went shopping and you're in a great part of town, and you can tell that it's sunny and you hear cars behind you, but you're happy as can be and you're just focused on getting your groceries in your car so you can go to your next task. That's the goal. That's the difference. It's being able to focus on what you're doing in order to participate. Okay, I see a lot of questions coming through. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Danielle, I don't know if you've kind of been going through these. I'll answer a few of them before we move on. Is there research on sensory processing and behavioral phenotypes? Not that I'm aware of, but I would love to know. Does trauma affect sensory processing, particularly childhood trauma? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Trauma affects everything. And when we're talking about having an informed trauma response, it's absolutely thinking about what did that person specifically go through trauma-wise. I think the first example that comes to mind, and I apologize if this is unexpected for anybody, if we think about, I've worked with kiddos in foster care, and some of them, I remember one dad went, I don't understand, I can't change my belt. Okay, why couldn't he change his belt? Why did his foster care kiddo get upset? That kiddo had been abused by a belt, somebody with a belt. Okay, so the sight of that belt brought about that response. Okay, now I'm not saying that that's just sensory, right? One of my favorite things to do is to co-treat with psychologists and with social workers because we get at all of that at once. I'm saying that it's really important to make sure that we're addressing those sensory needs so our body is in a place to use those wonderful cognitive strategies to overcome and work through that trauma. Resources I'd recommend for learning more about this topic, we will get to that. American Occupational Therapy Association, Illinois Occupational Therapy Association are really great resources. I will say that in my experience, there's a ton of misinformation out there. And so please be cautious with this. And when I say misinformation, what I'm really thinking of is social media. It drives me, this might be my high horse for the day. It drives me batty when I see influencers say, oh, you should rock your kid 10 times before bed and they're going to sleep through the night. Well, maybe that'll help. But I've had kiddos where we rock them for the first time in a swing, and I'm sending them to the neurologist because I think it elicited a seizure. Your sensory processing system is so unique and so sensitive. I really appreciate that question. And my recommendation is use those verified sources. Please don't listen to, this, that, everything else. Everybody has information to share. Just recognize it might not always apply to every situation. How does sensory defensiveness relate to substance use disorders? That is a really great question that I would love more research on. Substance use is something that's very near and dear to my heart. I don't have a great answer for you, except to say that when I think about substance use disorders and I think about its impact on the neurological system, it's a hardening impact. It's an impact that really messes with your central nervous system. So I can only imagine that sensory processing needs would also be impacted. My guess is that those individuals are more towards a low arousal state, but if there's some mental health things going on, they might be more agitated. I don't have a great answer, but I love that question and feel free to reach out and I'd love to explore that more. For task initiation and switching for our individuals, when it comes to them getting overstimulated by everything all at once, how do we get them back to the task at hand in a polite manner? I mean, love that. Your best intervention is going to be proactive. Okay, so it's going to be setting yourself up for success, setting your individuals up for success by looking at, spoiler alert, our next slide is going to be talking about the context. So a lot of our adults, we're going to talk about 3 different contexts. One to address this through, one is the person, one is the environment, and one is the occupation itself. And so if we think about the person, we talked about birth to 3 with kind of wet cement years, right? Our next big growth spurt that we see after early childhood is really not till high school. And after that, it's harder and harder to really re-regulate or change the brain. Because of that, we really like to look at the environment. So like I mentioned that there's fluorescent lights in the offices. You could probably tell in the office I'm in right now, I have fluorescent lights. I don't choose to have lamps in here because I'm usually here, there, and everywhere, but a lot of my colleagues do. What have they done? They've adapted the environment to meet those needs. We'll talk about a few things you can do that are really, really powerful to set you up for success. In terms of getting somebody back to the task at hand, I think it really depends on the individual. Is it the group? Is it the individual? If it's the individual, it's really working with an OT, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later and how to access that. And helping having an occupational therapist help an individual understand their sensory profile, understand what they need to do to get to the state that they need to be in, right? Because we don't always have to be in the green zone. The green zone is not the good zone. It's one of my biggest pet peeves, right? When it's time to go to bed, I don't want to be in the green zone. I want to be in low arousal. When it's time for me to work out, I'd rather be closer to yellow. My body's up and moving. I don't want to be in the green zone then. My body needs to move a little bit more. Okay. So it's finding out what are your levels, what tools help you, and then how do you advocate for those needs is kind of the epitome of it all. Books we can use for more information or training. Again, I'd reach out to AOTA. AOTA has wonderful publications. The kind of go-to tool that I'm aware of is the Out of Sync Child. There's not great research for how to help the adults. The Out of Sync Child is a great book that explains all of this, and then it has a book that's an activity component to kind of pull those pieces in. My recommendation is always going to be to work with an occupational therapy practitioner who has experience in sensory processing. There are some, I know I saw a couple of people ask about dementia. I have not found really great resources for that. I did have one book, and I'm looking on my bookshelf. I don't see it now. I apologize. That was the use of multisensory environments to support individuals with dementia. That's a really great resource as well. And I don't know, Danielle, if we have a way to email people, we could send that out later, or if we have a second at the end, I can do a quick Google search for you. Freeze and fawn come into play during this as well. I am not familiar with freeze and fawn. I don't know, Danielle, if you are, if somebody else can give some more information.
I think Hal is talking about like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Okay, so yes, similar concept,
Yes.
fight or flight. So yes, and then all my individuals have CP or spina bifida. Do you think this puts them in the low category? I feel like they're often tired and problems going in the morning. Grossly, yes, but again, I would really want to have an OT do an individualized assessment of their needs, especially with CP, more so than spina bifida, we see fluctuating needs, right? Because it depends on which muscles are tight. Is it the top half? Is it the bottom half? Is it the left? Is it the right? Do they have any ataxic movements? I also feel like what I've seen with our individuals with CP, unfortunately, if you are, this is you do a whole nother training on this, Danielle. Individuals with CP, we do not have great research on how to support their contraction needs, right? And so from what I've seen, there is a need for movement because many of our clients, when we have clients come to us who have been in a different facility for 20 or 30 years and they haven't been up and moving, and they're getting up and moving with us for the first time. On one hand, their vestibular system is very, very sensitive, okay? Similar to, I don't know if anybody experienced this after COVID. I had a few of my coworkers throw up driving to work. Why is that? Because they were sitting still at home for so long that their sensory processing system re-regulated to that. So that movement in the car was too much and they started throwing up, okay? When we're talking about individuals who have sat in a wheelchair for 40 or 50 years with limited repositioning, despite what maybe their body needs, if your neck is contracted like this, for example, which actually happened to me, I had to go to physical therapy. Not fun. Sorry if there's any PTs out there, I could never do your job. If you're contracted like this for 20, 30, 40 years, and all of a sudden somebody's helping you with repositioning and there's a slight movement this way, that's a huge change, right? So you might need other sensory information to help calm that down. So Brittany, that's a really, my answer is really, it depends. And I'm happy to help you try to find an OT to help those guys. How do we know when to refer someone to an OT? Wouldn't that be on the doctor to do if needed? Oh, anonymous attendee, I appreciate you. And yes, we will get to when to refer. We're going to talk about that next. Wouldn't it be on the doctor just to do? Unfortunately, if anybody's experienced the world of pediatrics, it can be very hard to advocate to get your kiddos' needs met. Personal example here, my daughter with her ear infections. I was livid after her last appointment when we went in because the doctor, I brought up, does she need tubes in her ears, right? To help her decrease ear infections. I see it affecting her speech. I see it affecting her balance, right? Is that going to impact her gross motor skills? And the doctor said, make sure you keep talking about how it's impacting her. And I said, excuse me? She said, we need 3 months of documented fluid or impact in order for insurance to be able to cover. And I brought up the idea of speech therapy. I brought up the idea of PT if needed, okay? What I've seen in EI and what I'm now experiencing is that doctors don't necessarily make those referrals quickly. Let's wait and see, let's wait and see, let's wait and see. If that's the case, when we're talking about individuals who are in systems that are set up to support them, when we talk about our adults, I haven't seen a single OT script come through for eval and treat sensory processing needs unless I have worked with the Q, the social worker, and we've talked about it and brought it to the doctor's attention. So in an ideal world, yes. In the world that we live in, I don't see that happening, unfortunately. Is there a list of recommended OT that specialize in adult individuals with disabilities? I have a list of about 4 people that I know of, and most of them work at organizations like Clearbrook. We will get to how to access OTs at the end, because that would be pretty awful of me to say, hey, OT can help and leave you guys high and dry. What tips do you have to tell if it's sensory or behavioral? My biggest tip is to pull an OT into your practice with a BCBA and a social worker. It's really that transdisciplinary model of being able to tease through everything. You need a full assessment of sensory needs to understand what's going on. Then you need to be able to reflect on that behavioral data and say, is anything lining up? Is it when somebody has to go to workshop earlier in the morning and their body isn't ready to go that we're seeing behavioral needs? Is that related, right? And then it's almost like a mini experiment, if you will. Not that our individuals are people to be experimented on, but we don't want to try too many things at once because we're not going to know what works. So we'll get to an example where we did try something at once and we're trying to tease out if it's working from a sensory perspective. I just spoke really fast. I think we got through all the questions. Is there anything else up there, Danielle?
The only other thing that was asked quite a while ago was if there are any diagnoses associated with impairment of the certain senses.
Any diagnoses? I'm not totally understanding that question. So I would say, like, if you have a spinal cord injury, you're going to have impaired sensation. If you're blind, that's going to be impaired. So it really depends. But overall, is there a diagnosis where I know that there's going to be sensory processing difficulties? No, because everybody's different. So I'm not sure if that's answering the question.
That was it.
All right, cool. I'm going to do my best to share my screen. Thank you guys for all the questions. I appreciate being able to go back and forth with you. Okay. All right, so we just talked about, can everybody see strategies to support proactive, reactive? Cool. All right. So again, when we're talking about that, we want to look at the person, the individual themselves. We want to look at the environment. We want to look at the occupation. I'm going to breeze through this quickly just to make sure we get to what you guys are asking about, but very briefly, if you can get your person factors, your environment factors, and your occupational factors to overlap, that overlap is one's ability to do. So if you ask me as an individual with education and occupational therapy to go to the Clearbrook Child gym just down the hall that I know very well, so it's a familiar environment, and the occupation you asked me to do, a little confusing because I'm an occupational therapist, but occupation is whatever occupies your time. If you ask me to do an evaluation on sensory processing on a 2-year-old, that's the occupation. That overlap is there. I can do that. Now, if you asked me as a person with education in occupational therapy to go to the Clearbrook Child Therapy treatment room down the hall, an environment I know, and you asked me to do calculus, that's not going to work. Okay, that's too far away. Similarly, if you asked me, a person with education in occupational therapy, to go to a Taylor Swift concert and then do an occupational therapy evaluation, that's going to be really challenging to do, right? That overlay is not there. So we really want to look to align those factors. How do we do that? We do that by supporting, well, backing up, working with an OT, coming up with a sensory profile, looking to support with the recognition that there are some strategies that can support a lot of people, right? So if we're talking about vision, here are some examples of things that might support, right? You have microfiber lights. You have a, this little kiddo here is doing a almost like a word search for kids, right? Can you find different things? Because sometimes more visual input can be regulating. If it's too bright out, throw sunglasses on. That's an easy one for vision. Some people really like repetition. And so looking at the balls, go back and forth and back and forth. Something to keep in mind as we're talking, right? We're talking about proactive strategies and reactive strategies. These are things that for some individuals might set them up for success, right? Through that sensory diet throughout the day. Or they might have a meltdown moment and need support using a tool to come back to a regulated state. The other piece of this to keep in mind, it is very, very hard to isolate only one sense. Okay, why is that? Because we're multifaceted. We're humans, we're not robots. So even with sunglasses, well, that seems pretty straightforward, but there's a tactile component to putting glasses on your face. And so it's finding the right sunglasses for that individual. These are just ideas to get your body or get your brains thinking. Auditory, your sense of hearing. I think most people are aware that classical music can be very regulating. Something else that a lot of individuals use are noise canceling headphones. Now you can have the kind that you get at the hardware store that just block it out, or you can get a fancier kind, whether it's Sony or Bose or whoever is out there, right? That actively works against that input, but also can then put preferred input into your sense of hearing. This far right picture is an example, well, it's not quite an example, but one of my favorite tools, and this is something I saw a lot of people talking about day programming. Alpha waves are a specific type of wave that has been found in research to both regulate the brain so that it can slow down and focus at the same time. There's a lot of alpha wave music that's free on YouTube. When I worked in early intervention, I went into a daycare where a kiddo was having a really hard time slowing down to sleep. And I said, okay, instead of playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star at nap time, can you just try playing alpha waves instead and see if that helps? And I came back the next week and the teacher went, I'm the Pied Piper, give me something else. They're all going to sleep, no problem. This is amazing. It's a very, very powerful sense. And so we can use that proactively, right, to set up the environment for success. Your sense of smell, very, very strong sense, okay? There's a lot of scented putties out there now. I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, the smell of grandma's cookies is such a warm memory for me. There's also essential oils. With your sense of smell, be very, very cautious. Not only can this bring about strong memories, like my example of flowers and funerals for myself, but it can also be, it can get to that sense of interoception, and it can be very dysregulating. Whether for me, I hate the smell of lemon. It gives me a really bad headache. So just be cautious, know your individuals, try things slowly. I am not saying please go do all these things, but if you happen to know that Tommy really likes the smell of chocolate, okay, maybe we can use that. Also, please be very cautious with essential oils. They are very, very powerful tools, to the point where, in fact, did you know, in the state of Illinois, you actually need a doctor's order to be able to use them in the schools. They're that strong and powerful, so please be careful. Your sense of taste, again, maybe we like the taste of chocolate, maybe we like the taste of mint, and that's regulating. Maybe we really like salty foods. Something to keep in mind when we're talking about foods is also that you get a proprioceptive response as well, right? So why do I say that? Because it's not just the taste. When you see people chewing things, right? Think about all the muscles in your face. If you didn't know, there's 46 muscles involved in swallowing, 47. Again, I'm not a numbers person, I apologize. There's a lot of muscles involved in swallowing. So you are activating all of those when you're chewing and you're swallowing. You are also getting really heavy input to your joint here, okay? So all of that chewing, maybe you don't like that. So maybe you only want soft chocolate chip cookies, but maybe chewing gum gives you regulating input. So you do that to slow down. Maybe you do it to wake up. It's that proprioceptive input again. Same with crunchy foods. Do you like that? Do you like a lot of different textures? Okay, so it's not just the sense of taste. Again, everything is very multifaceted. This is probably the most well-known. We talk about sensory. I was really thrilled to not see fidget as one of the big things on the word cloud. One of my favorite phrases that I should have just had on a shirt when I worked at the school is that fidgets are tools, they are not toys. So the purpose of fidgets is to find something that allows you to focus on the task at hand. This is really trial and error to figure out what works best for you. There's all sorts of options out there. But again, it's meant to be a tool, not a toy, and that's something that most individuals, even adults, need to be taught. Proprioception, again, our regulating sense. There's real easy ways to include regulating proprioceptive input throughout the day, right? Can we sit on ball chairs? If we are going to do some exercises, I love a half Bosu ball. Make sure that until you know if somebody's safe, right? You have some hands-on support, trust their balance. If you don't trust their balance, please don't do this. If you add in that upper extremity piece, what are you doing? Think about if you were to stand on a wobbly surface with both feet, you don't even need to lift a foot in the air like in this picture, right? All of that input, the way it's hitting your muscles, it's hitting your joints. Now you're adding in the upper extremities, okay? That's more muscles, that's more joints. Think about our guys who like to jump and our guys who like to flap, okay? This activity is hitting at all of those joints for them. Am I saying I want them to stop jumping and flapping? Absolutely not. I'm saying, can we provide them something really powerful to get at that so that they can do what they want to do? Okay, similar to trampoline, push-ups are great, wall push-ups, love those as well. Your vestibular sense, I think somebody mentioned stretching. Yoga is a really great way. You need to be very careful though. I should pause and say with your vestibular sense because it can be very dysregulating. I have a very sensitive vestibular sense. When I first started working in an outpatient peds clinic, I was nauseous at the end of every day from swinging kids back and forth. Okay, so you need to really understand what your individual's needs are. For most people, like I said, swinging can be very regulating. For some people, if you need to wake up, yoga with inversions can help. I've had individuals who really like wobble stools, right? A little bit of movement during the day. You might have noticed I've been shifting. I'm not somebody who was made to sit at a desk and work. And so being able to access that movement helps me continue to do what I need to do. Interoception, I saw people talk about breathing. Interoception, I don't, that I'm aware of. There's not a way to say, hey, stomach, stop hurting. But what can we do to access our sense of interoception is deep breathing. And there's different ways to do that, right? Some people like to include a tactile component, hand on your chest, hand on your belly with a deep breath. Some people really like 5-finger breathing, where you deep breath in, deep breath out, and you keep going. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Personally, I hate that. I don't like how that feels on my hands. It's not my thing. Some of my clients, some of the students I've worked with, some of the kiddos I've worked with, they love that. It's a tool that's right there. My favorite tool that's right there are candles, right? I can throw up 3 candles and say, okay, let's blow our candles out. You know, it seems like it's time to slow down. Can you take a deep breath for me and blow that candle out? Great job. Let's do another. Oh, let's try that one again. The candle didn't go out. Can you do it really deep and long for me? Okay, and then you can control how many candles we need to do in that moment. Do we have any more questions pop up before we talk about the impact? Didn't see any.
Yes,
Oh, we
there are
do.
several questions.
Okay.
One that came up prior to this section was asking if there's any correlation between surgery and increased subsequent sensory defensiveness.
I haven't seen research on that, but yes, I would, anytime somebody's going to go to the hospital, I almost anticipate some sensory defensiveness. And that is something that's very emotional as well, right? Like you have people touching you in different ways, especially if you're an individual who maybe has some cognitive. If we don't understand what's happening to our body responds with fight or flight. So then we're more likely to respond to if I see a glove, well, I don't like that anymore. My niece, at this point, I think the diagnosis is brain injury. There's not a system in her body that really functions right. But when she was real itty bitty, anytime she went to the hospital, she'd use her communication device to then say, go away, go away, go away. She didn't want anybody around her after because it was too much and she needed that calm time. Now that is behavioral, that is emotional, and it's sensory. Other questions?
Yes, there's several in the Q&A.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. Will most OTs be familiar with sensory needs if asked?
Yes. That being said, it is an area of specialty. And so my recommendation, which we'll get to in a little bit, is if you know an OT and you ask them and they don't know, chances are they're going to know another OT who can help you. So don't be scared to ask. Treatment for severe SIB. Really, I couldn't recommend more, like a transdisciplinary model of treatment. Work with your BCBA, work with your social worker, pull an OT in. It's really looking at in depth that person's history to decide where do we want to start. How does Clearbrook pay to have OT on staff? We have a wonderful board of directors and we have a wonderful executive team who have essentially said, we're going to take the hit. You guys function, you put us at a deficit, but we know that you're hard. So we have a development team who fundraises for us. Could have a whole nother conversation about how we are working to try to access HCBS services. They recently increased the reimbursement rate to be $111 an hour, which is sustainable, but it's not necessarily easy to access. Again, that red tape. So we're figuring that out right now. But when you look at Clearbrook as a whole, it's really because the people who lead our organization are saying, hey, we want you here. We want OT, we want PT, we want speech. My team, we do, of course, initial evaluations for our ICFs, but we do a lot of staff training. We do a lot of consult. We do a lot of program support. And so it's really the wonderful people who support us. And then all of our donors who say, hey, we want you here. And we want your expertise. Okay, plan, purchase for sensory support items. Not that I'm aware of, but I know that we're looking right now at using some of the funds that are available to purchase communication devices instead of using them towards home improvement, but I'm not well versed enough in that to answer that question. I would guess so. I know that there are some organizations out there that specifically create sensory environments for individuals and attempt to go through through insurance, but I don't know any of the names. I've only heard of them. So I don't have a great answer. I apologize. How can you do things to assist individuals when one support for an individual may be a bigger sensory trigger for another? Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And unfortunately, having the space to be able to do that. And so that's where knowing your individuals is so important, and knowing your team and being able to tag in, tag out, remove people as needed, take people to a different space. Because yes, there are plenty of things. I have an individual who really loves his tambourine. Nobody else loves his tambourine. And so even the staff, and it's hard. So we're looking at, are there other things we can do to support his regulation needs? Because it can be irritating and dysregulating to other people. Supporting people who use wheelchairs or have limited physical movement abilities and proprioception and vestibular, working with OT and PT. And so we're actually doing a training for staff at our upcoming in-service day exactly on that, on how do we support range of motion, how do we support sensory needs for individuals who use wheelchair. And so there's lots of people out there who have like wheelchair yoga or seated yoga. Those are great stretches. Something else that's really going to help is, I believe most people or most organizations are required, and if not, it would just be best practice to have a repositioning policy and make sure that people are repositioned appropriately, because if you're repositioning every hour and a half to 2 hours at the very least, you're going to hit those senses differently, and that's going to support them in a sensory diet way. Resources that we can utilize for sensory regulation for parents. I would lean into the Out of Sync Child in the activity book. That's a really good one. And again, getting them hooked up with an OT. I'll advocate for a 22-year-old that chooses to be naked. She's willing to dress in the mornings and stay dressed during her day, but as soon as she arrives home, she gets naked. She tolerates a robe for brief periods of time. Any suggestions? Work with an OT. I love what you're doing, because that does sound like a sensory need. Sometimes what I would look at are, what are the fabrics? I would offer her different fabrics to try and see what she likes. So pull her in, see if you can get some motivation, tap into that volition, allow her to make the decision. Is it that she will tolerate bamboo clothing? Is it that she will tolerate clothes that are her favorite color? Maybe she only wants short sleeves instead of long sleeves. And so I would target one area of clothing, give her options, see where you get, and then go to the next area of clothing, target different options, and keep going in that way. Okay. Good.
The only other thing that I saw was Barbara had said that she actually is in a school in the state of Illinois and she uses essential oils to calm her students. She was not aware that she should not be using essential oils. So is there an alternative?
Just get a doctor's script. Whoever you're using it for, see if you can get a doctor's script. In terms of an alternative, there's not one that I'm aware of. It's not something that's regularly enforced, but I wouldn't want you to get in trouble. That's why I'm bringing it up. But I do know many teachers who will use essential oils in their classroom, so I don't have a great answer for that. I apologize, but I love that you're trying to get at their sense of sensation.
Okay, that's all I saw.
Okay. Sense of sensation. I think I've been talking too much, you guys. Okay. I am going to share my screen again, and I recognize we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to breeze through these slides. Oh, I don't think you guys can't see that. I think, or can you see? I think I shared the wrong screen. Oh, thumbs up. Okay, impact of sensory processing. All right, breezing through. Again, every person processes, thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate all of you. Every person processes sensation differently. Some need sensory input to wake their bodies up, some to slow down. Great example, my husband likes to work out in the morning. That wakes his body up. If you ask me to work out in the morning, you would not want to be around me for the rest of the day. I'm not a fun person when I have to do that. I need to go in the afternoon, the evening to slow my body back down. There are only difficulties, or sensory processing is only a difficulty, if you will, when it impedes our ability to participate. So we're going to skip this poll everywhere, but the question was, is this a sensory processing difficulty? And it was flapping, rocking, visual stimming. The answer is no. Okay, we used to teach that. We didn't want people to flap. Don't flap. Why are you flapping? I don't care if somebody flaps. I think that's great that they found a way to regulate their body. I only care if they need to brush their teeth and they need to flap their hands at the same time. So what am I going to do? I'm going to look for a strategy, a sensory strategy to meet that need first before we go to that activity. Okay. Signs of difficulty based on the questions I'm seeing. I think everybody knows these. Again, fight or flight, fight, property destruction, aggression, SIB, flight, decreased attention span, elopement, covering ears, picky eaters, can't sit still. This is one of my favorite. Goes to the bathroom instead of doing work. How do we end up with that complaint in the high school from teachers? That comes from, in middle school, we teach kiddos, hey, if it's too much, if you can't focus on your work, ask to go to the bathroom so that you can go for a walk. Okay, well, that then becomes, yes, maybe there's a sensory need, but now it's behavior and we have to tease that apart. Humming loudly, that bothers a lot of people. Well, what's going on? Does that person like the sound? Does that person like the input? That can be a sign too. How do we address? Again, OT collaboration. An OT would come in, do a consult and eval, looking at a full assessment of sensory processing abilities. I should mention there is no other practitioner, discipline, therapist who has expertise in sensory processing. It is just OT. That's one of our few areas of practice that we really own that nobody else addresses. Period. So finding an OT to do that analysis of a sensory processing ability, of somebody's sensory processing abilities, as well as of their environment, and then to pull the team in. This was a quick example. I was contacted by a BCBA. That's actually how we ended up here today, because an individual had an increase in agitation following a decrease in aggressive behaviors. Came in, did a full eval, did a lot of staff training. That's the most important part of sensory intervention is the training. It's the understanding. Why? Because if I asked you to give a fidget to a kiddo and I didn't tell you why it's important or when to use it or how to use it, it's not going to be successful. And so when we were looking at doing sensory interventions to support this individual, I needed his staff. I needed those DSPs. I needed the Q. I needed the coordinator. I needed everybody to understand where I was coming from. So we did a big staff training so that we have the best chance of being successful as possible in supporting this individual. All that we did was change the light bulbs, which is really funny seeing all those comments come in about light bulbs. Objectively, we're seeing a slight correlation with a decrease in agitation behaviors when we look at the behavioral data. Subjectively, the staff are reporting that the home feels better, that it's warmer, that it's cozier. Okay, all of those just by changing the lights from fluorescent lights to a yellow-based light bulb. And we're headed towards a change, which is really exciting. How can you find an OT? Contact a local OT. Like I said, I don't have a great list, but if you know an OT, reach out. Chances are they know somebody. I still have a group with the group of people that I went to OT school with. And a few times a month, people ask questions, and we're all across the country in different practice settings. Reach out. Contact a LOTA. My biggest recommendation outside of a local OT would also be to contact local universities and colleges. So here at Clearbrook, we worked with UIC. They have an OTD program. Midwestern has an OT. They have a master's and a doctoral program. And then Wright College has a certified occupational therapy assistant program. Not only are there benefits for the student coming here, we've benefited so much from having our students. And I'm hearing more and more social service organizations that are bringing students on, especially for their doctoral capstone project, that are then creating positions to hire those individuals. Okay, it takes a lot of advocacy in order to do so. But again, our board of directors, our VPs, our C-suite, they see the benefit and they say to us, we want you here. We want you guys to help. And so being able to pull those students in helps make your case. We're going to do next thoughts. What do you hear now? But instead, I'm going to say thank you because it is exactly 11:30. Danielle, I'm happy to stay on if there's more questions, but I also, if people need to go, of course, want them to be able to go.
Well, first of all, thank you, Laura. People are raving about you in the comments. They want you back for
Oh,
part 2. So,
oh, thank you.
yes. I did see there was one question that came through, and I apologize that I kind of missed. Oh, Lashonda asked, she has an 18-year-old young adult that still puts things in her mouth, or sorry, a client. Mom diagnosed with pica. Should the mom consider an OT?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That is the only question that I saw. Just a couple reminders. You can view the past recording of this webinar on our website, icpn.org, to get to our YouTube site, which is under past workshops. Certificates are sent out to the email address that you registered with. If for some reason you have any concerns with that, you can email me, ddaly@hope.us. But thank you so much, Laura, for being with us today. We loved having you. Hopefully we can have you again in the future because it has already been requested several times. But thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And yes, just thank you. Thank you.
No,
Great
thank you.
presentation.
All right.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Everyone have a great rest of your day.